My name is Caleb Hartwell. I'm 36 years old. 3 weeks ago, I stood in my father's driveway in Dayton, Ohio, holding a cardboard box of his belongings, while my older brother Marcus pointed at me in front of 40 people at the wake and said, "This is the son who couldn't even show up when Dad was dying. Don't let him near the family business now that there's money involved." 40 people. My aunts, my cousins, my father's old co-workers, the pastor who'd known me since I was 6 years old. All of them turned to look at me the way you look at a stranger who wandered into the wrong funeral. I didn't say a word. I just stood there holding that box, my knuckles white against the cardboard, while my own mother looked at the floor instead of looking at me. I want to tell you how I got to that driveway. I want to tell you what was inside that box. And I want to tell you what happened 4 days later when I opened my father's safe deposit box at Fifth Third Bank and understood for the first time in my life exactly what kind of family I'd grown up in. But first you need to know who I was before any of this. I was the quiet one, the one who left Dayton at 19 and didn't look back. I went to Ohio State on a partial scholarship, slept on a friend's couch for 2 years because I couldn't afford a dorm, and graduated with a degree in mechanical engineering and $40,000 in debt. My father, Walter Hartwell, ran a small auto parts supply company called Hartwell Diesel Components. It wasn't glamorous, it supplied parts to trucking fleets across 3 states. My brother Marcus stayed home, went to community college for 2 semesters, dropped out, and started working for Dad right away. He drove the company truck, he had the company credit card, he had, as far as anyone in that town knew, the whole future. I had nothing but a duffel bag and a Greyhound ticket the day I left. For 12 years, the story my family told about me, the story Marcus told, the story my mother repeated at every Thanksgiving, was that I'd abandoned them, that I thought I was better than Dayton, that I'd turned my back on a family business that could have set me up for life because I wanted to chase some fantasy out in Seattle. Here's what they never said out loud. Not once. Not in 12 years. They never said why I left. When I was 17, my father caught me in the garage one night, doing something I'd never told anyone about. Not even my wife until last year. I was building a small electric motor controller from scrap parts, just teaching myself. Just curious, the way some kids take apart radios. My father walked in, saw the soldering iron, saw the wires, and didn't ask a single question about what I was doing. He just said, "Marcus needs you in the warehouse tomorrow at 6. Stop wasting time on toys." 2 weeks later, I found the controller in the trash, snapped in half. That was the pattern for 17 years. Anything I built, anything I was proud of, got treated like a distraction from the real business of being Marcus's quiet shadow. My mother, Diane, never intervened. She told me once, when I was 15, "Your brother has the personality for this family. You have the brains for somewhere else." I used to think that was a compliment. It took me years to understand it was a sentence being handed down. So when I left at 19, I left because staying meant disappearing a little more every single year. I built a life in Seattle nobody back home knew about. I worked 2 jobs through grad school. I got hired by a small robotics startup nobody had heard of in 2014. I won't bore you with the technical details, but the company built precision actuators for warehouse automation. And in 2019, we got acquired by a logistics conglomerate for an amount of money that still doesn't feel real when I say it out loud. My shares, after taxes, after everything, came out to just over $11 million. I told my family none of this. Not because I was hiding some grand revenge plan. I genuinely didn't think they'd care, and some bitter, tired part of me didn't want to hand Marcus another reason to perform humility in front of relatives while quietly resenting me. So when people back in Dayton asked my mother what I was up to, she'd just say, "Caleb's doing fine out west, I think, with computers or something," in the same tone you'd use to describe a nephew you'd lost track of. My father got sick in late winter. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. Marcus called me exactly once, a 4-minute phone call, to tell me Dad was sick and that I should come if I wanted to, but that everyone understood if my important life out there made that difficult. I flew out the next morning. I sat with my father in that hospital room for 6 days straight, holding his hand while machines beeped around us, while Marcus dropped by for 20 minutes at a time between handling business stuff, which I later learned meant golfing with his buddy Russ and meeting with a man named Dale Pruitt from a competing parts distributor. On the 5th day, when Marcus wasn't in the room, my father squeezed my hand and said something I didn't understand at the time. He said, "Kay, when this is over, You go to the bank before you go anywhere else. Don't let your brother get there first. Promise me." I promised. I didn't know what he meant. I assumed it was the confusion that sometimes comes near the end. He died on a Tuesday morning while I was getting coffee in the hospital cafeteria. Marcus was the one in the room. He called me an hour later, his voice already arranging itself into the tone of a man who'd been the devoted son all along. The funeral was that Saturday, and that's where we started. With me standing in the driveway holding a box. Here's what was actually in the box, since I never told you. It was the box Marcus had handed me that morning, in front of everyone, with a little performance of generosity. "Dad wanted you to have his old tools," he said loudly enough for the relatives to hear, "even though you never really used them." Inside were a few rusted wrenches, an old thermos, and a photograph of me at age 8 standing next to my father's first delivery truck. That was it. That was 12 years and a deathbed promise reduced to a box of scrap metal handed to me like a consolation prize while my brother stood in a new suit that cost more than my father's last paycheck. My mother didn't defend me. My Aunt Carol actually laughed, a short surprised laugh, like she'd been waiting for someone to finally say what everyone secretly thought. I drove to my motel that night and didn't sleep. Not because I was angry, though I was, but because I kept hearing my father's voice. Go to the bank before anyone else. Don't let your brother get there first. So, Monday morning, 4 days after the funeral, I walked into the Fifth Third Bank branch on Wilmington Pike with my father's death certificate and a key he'd mailed me 8 months earlier in an unmarked envelope with no letter, no explanation, just a small brass key taped to a piece of cardboard. I'd assumed it was for some shed or toolbox. I'd almost thrown it away. It was for a safe deposit box registered solely in my father's name, with me listed as the sole secondary access holder. Not Marcus, not my mother. Me. The bank officer, a soft-spoken woman named Renata Ibarra, walked me into the vault room herself. She said, "Your father came in every few months for the last 2 years. Always alone. Always asked specifically that no one else ever be added to this box." She said it carefully, like she already sensed there was a story here she wasn't part of but could feel the weight of. I opened the box with my hands shaking more than I expected. Inside were 3 things: a leather folder, a flash drive, and a sealed envelope with my name written on it in my father's handwriting. The same handwriting from 100 birthday cards I kept in a shoebox for 20 years. I read the letter first. "Caleb, if you're reading this, it means I didn't get the chance to say it to your face, or I did, and you didn't believe me yet, which is more likely because I never gave you a reason to. I have been a coward for a long time, son, and I want you to know that before anything else in this folder makes you angry at me too. I let your brother treat you the way he did, because it was easier than admitting the company needed him to feel important, more than it needed you to feel loved. That's the truth, and I'm sorry for it. But cowards notice things even when they don't say anything. I noticed everything Marcus did the last 6 years, and I wrote it all down, and I have proof, and I need you to be the one who finds it, because you are the only person in this family who never once asked me for money." I had to put the letter down for a minute. The leather folder was full of bank statements, invoices, and a ledger my father had kept by hand, the kind of meticulous paper trail of a man who built parts for diesel engines and trusted nothing. He couldn't measure himself. Over 6 years, Marcus had been running a side arrangement with Dale Pruitt, the man from the rival distributor, redirecting roughly 30% of Hartwell Diesel's biggest fleet contracts through a shell account, underbilling the company on paper while overbilling the clients directly, and pocketing the difference through a consulting fee that didn't exist. My father had figured it out 18 months before his diagnosis. He hadn't confronted Marcus. He'd simply started documenting everything, quietly, the way he documented everything else in his life, in pencil, in neat columns, never trusting his own son's word over a number he could verify himself. The flash drive had something worse. Email exchanges Marcus thought were deleted, recovered by my father with the help of an IT consultant named Priya Anand, whose invoice was also in the folder, paid in cash, dated 4 months before he died. In one email, Marcus wrote to Dale Pruitt, "Once the old man's gone, the business is basically mine to run how I want, and Caleb's not getting a dime of it. He hasn't earned a single hour in this place." My father had read that email while he was already sick, while I was holding his hand in a hospital bed 3 states away from the betrayal his other son was already celebrating and writing. The last item in the folder was a single sheet, my father's actual will, separate from the version Marcus had read aloud at the funeral. The version Marcus presented to the family lawyer split the company 60-40 in his favour, with a note claiming my father had verbally amended it before he died. This new document, notarised 11 months before his death, by a notary named Felix Granger, whose stamp I later confirmed was registered and legitimate, left Hartwell Diesel Components in a 50-50 trust between Marcus and me, with one binding condition. Any partner found to have diverted company funds through undisclosed third-party arrangements would forfeit their share entirely to the other. My father hadn't just suspected Marcus. He'd built a legal trapdoor specifically shaped for the exact crime he expected his favourite son to keep committing. I sat in that bank's private viewing room for almost 2 hours. Renata checked on me twice. I didn't cry, not yet. I felt something colder than grief, something closer to the moment a fog finally lifts off a road you've been driving your whole life, and you finally see how close to the edge you've actually been. I called a lawyer that same afternoon, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Teresa Kowalski, who specialised in estate and business fraud. I didn't call my mother, I didn't call Marcus. For 2 weeks, I let everyone believe I'd simply gone back to Seattle to lick my wounds, which is what Marcus told people, according to my cousin Brent, who still texted me sometimes out of guilt. Teresa and I built the case quietly. We confirmed Pruitt's shell account through a forensic accountant. We confirmed the email metadata through a digital forensics expert who verified the messages hadn't been altered. We confirmed the second will's notarization through Felix Granger himself, who remembered my father clearly because, in his words, he came in looking like a man settling a debt he'd been carrying a long time. The family business had a board meeting scheduled for the third Thursday of that month, the kind of meeting Marcus had been running like a coronation since the funeral, inviting our mother, 2 of Dad's old business partners, and even Dale Pruitt himself, who Marcus was apparently planning to bring on as an official, strategic partner, which would have let him siphon even more money out in plain sight once he had full control. I showed up to that meeting. Nobody expected me. Marcus's face did something I'd never seen it do before when I walked into that conference room at the Hartwell office, the same building I used to sweep floors in as a teenager. Surprise first, then a kind of practiced charm sliding back over it like a mask clicking into place. "Kay," he said, standing up, arms open like we were old friends. "Didn't think you'd be back for this." I didn't sit down. I set Teresa's prepared binder on the table, slid one copy to my mother, one to Dad's old partner Stan Okafor, and one directly in front of Marcus. "Before anyone signs anything today," I said, "I think everyone should know what Dad actually left behind and what you've been doing with it." Marcus laughed. That easy laugh he'd been using on people his whole life, to make them doubt themselves before they even finished a sentence. "Caleb, buddy, you've been gone 12 years. You don't know the first thing about how this business runs." "I know exactly how it's been running," I said. "Dale Pruitt's shell account, the underbilling on the Midwest freight contract, the consulting invoices that don't match a single hour of actual consulting. I know because Dad knew, and Dad wrote every single transaction down before he died." The room went silent in a way that felt like the air pressure had changed. My mother's hand went to her mouth. Stan Okafor, a man who'd known my father for 30 years, slowly opened the binder in front of him and started reading. Marcus tried to recover, tried the line about the will being verbally amended, the same story he'd told at the funeral. That's when I told him about the second will, the one with Felix Granger's notary stamp, the one with the forfeiture clause built specifically for him. "You think Dad didn't see this coming?" I said. "He built a trap door with your name already written under it." Marcus stood up so fast his chair hit the wall behind him. For a second I thought he might actually come across that table. Instead he turned to our mother, voice cracking in a way I hadn't heard since we were kids. "Mum, tell him this is insane, tell him." My mother didn't say anything. She just looked at the binder in her hands, then at me, and for the first time in 12 years she looked like she actually saw me standing there. Not as the disappointing son, but as the only person in that room who'd ever told her the truth. Teresa Kowalski handled the legal aftermath over the following 2 months. Marcus was forced out of operational control of Hartwell Diesel Components under the forfeiture clause. his 40% stake reverting to me per my father's documented intent, pending the fraud investigation into the Pruitt arrangement, which eventually resulted in Marcus settling civil claims rather than face criminal charges, paying back close to $200,000 to the company over a structured payment plan. Dale Pruitt's distributorship lost 3 of its biggest clients within a year once word got around the trucking community, which in a town like Dayton travels faster than anyone expects. I didn't take the company for myself out of greed, and I want to be honest about that, because by then I genuinely didn't need the money. I brought in Stan Okafor as interim operations manager, a man my father trusted for 3 decades, and within 6 months, Hartwell Diesel Components was running cleaner and more profitably than it had in years, this time with actual oversight instead of a quiet conspiracy hiding behind family loyalty. My mother and I talk now, carefully, the way 2 people rebuild something that was cracked for over a decade. She told me once, over coffee in her kitchen, the same kitchen I grew up eating cereal in alone most mornings. I think I convinced myself your father loved Marcus more because Marcus needed it more. I never stopped to ask what you needed. I didn't have an answer for her that day. I'm not sure I need one anymore. Marcus and I haven't spoken since the day Teresa filed the formal forfeiture notice. I heard through Brent that he moved to Cincinnati, started selling insurance, tells people he stepped away from the family business to pursue new opportunities. I don't feel triumphant when I hear that. I feel something quieter, something closer to relief, the kind you feel when a wound you'd stopped noticing finally closes over. Last week I drove out to the cemetery alone. I brought the old thermos from that box Marcus had handed me at the funeral, the one meant as an insult, the one that turned out to hold the only honest thing my brother gave me that whole week, an accidental clue that my father had been planning something all along. I sat there for a while, not saying much, just letting the wind move through the maple trees the way it had at every funeral I'd ever been to in that town. My father spent the last 2 years of his life building a case against the son he raised in his own house, because the truth mattered to him, more than the comfort of pretending. He never said he loved me out loud, not once that I can remember. But he left me a key, a ledger, and a trapdoor built in pencil and patience. And somehow that said more than any words ever could have. I think about what my mother said about Marcus needing love more than I did. I don't think that was ever true. I think Marcus needed to be right more than he needed to be. Honest, and in the end, my father made sure the truth didn't need either of us to defend it. It just needed someone willing to open the box.